Lincoln, Kennedy, Garfield, McKinley. What do all these U.S. presidents have in common? They got assassinated. Jackson, Reagan, Roosevelt, and Roosevelt. What do these presidents have in common? Well, none of them got assassinated, but all of them had someone try. An attempt on a sitting president's life is almost a rite of passage for any insane American looking to stir the pot. Let me set the stage. October 14th, 1912. Teddy Roosevelt, iconic former president, is running for a third term after having been out of office for over 3 years. Why? He was heavily dissatisfied with how President William Howard Taft, his successor, had been doing. After failing to get the Republican Party nomination, Roosevelt decides to make his own party, the Progressive Party, better known as the Bull Moose Party for reasons we'll get into later. The Progressive Party was formed due to the deliberate betrayal of trust by the Republican Party and the fatal incapacity of the Democratic Party to deal with the new issues of the new time have compelled the people to forge a new instrument of government through which to give effect their wills in laws and institutions. The party was unhampered by tradition, uncorrupted by power, undismayed by the magnitude of the task, and the party offers itself as the instrument of the people to sweep away old abuses to build a new and nobler commonwealth. With his running mate Hiram Johnson, Roosevelt pushed for support of women's suffrage and social welfare reform. Since he was literally the founder of the party, he was the only one running and got the nomination. Now back to October 14th. Roosevelt's on the campaign trail in Milwaukee, ready to give a 50-page speech at the Milwaukee Auditorium, now the Miller High Life Theater. Roosevelt walks out of the Gilpatrick Hotel, now a Hyatt Regency hotel. His doctor, Scurry Terrell, begged him to rest instead of giving his speech, since his voice had been giving out for the last couple of days. Never one to be told what to do, Roosevelt left the hotel for his waiting limo. A Bavarian immigrant, John Schrank's parents died young, leaving him with his aunt and uncle. They also die, leaving him with just his girlfriend, who, you guessed it, also dies, in the General Schwalm disaster, in which a steamboat turned over in the East River and killed more people in New York City than any other disaster up until 9/11. The night after President William McKinley was assassinated, Schrank had a dream where McKinley asked him to avenge his death and pointed to a picture of Teddy Roosevelt. Even before this vision, Schrank had disliked Roosevelt, saying, quote, "A man that wants a third term has no right to live." A staunch admirer of George Washington and self-proclaimed history buff, Schrank continued to see the ghost of McKinley for the next couple of days, each time asking him to get revenge on Roosevelt, his successor. Schrank felt that Roosevelt's seeking of a third term was indicative of his hunger for power and dictatorship. As Roosevelt made his way to the car to get to the speech, Schrank aimed a .38 caliber Colt Police positive revolver and shot. Before he could shoot again, Schrank was tackled to the ground by Ebert Martin, a secretary of Roosevelt's and an ex-football player. The crowd that had gathered to watch the president began to scream at Martin to lynch and kill Schrank, but Roosevelt stumbled to the stand and commanded, quote, "Don't hurt him, bring him here." Martin brought Schrank up to the podium where Roosevelt grabbed his head and asked, "Why did you do it?" Finding Schrank unresponsive, Roosevelt sent him to the police. After Schrank was taken away, Roosevelt finally noticed the blood on his shirt. Schrank had hit him. Quote, "He pinked me, Henry," he noted to local party leader Henry Calkins, who later wrote a book on the assassination attempt. Determined to still give his 50-page speech, Roosevelt refused to even be examined by his doctor, after deducing that his lungs had not been hit, since no blood came up when he coughed. After arriving to a crowd of over 10,000 people at the auditorium, Roosevelt told the crowd that he had just been shot, but, quote, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose," solidifying the party's nickname in reference to their strength and perseverance. As Roosevelt reached in his breast pocket for his speech, he noticed something odd. There was a hole going right through it. Indeed, the bullet Schrank had fired had miraculously hit Roosevelt's speech and glasses case in his pocket, and because of the length of the speech, the bullet did not make it far enough in his chest to be lethal. Roosevelt gave the entire 90-minute speech before finally allowing himself to go to Johnston Emergency Hospital on Milwaukee's south side. When Schrank was taken to court, the motives he stated were very similar to those of successful presidential assassin Charles Guiteau, who killed President James Garfield 30 years earlier. Guiteau had claimed that God had told him to kill Garfield, and Schrank argued that he was simply God's instrument, and that it was his right to kill any man who seeks a third term in office. Schrank was positive that many were going to regard him as a hero, and requested that his gun and bullet that hit Roosevelt be put in the New York Historical Society. After being informed that the doctors had left the bullet in Roosevelt's chest, Schrank became angry and shouted, quote, "That's my bullet." Despite comparing himself to Joan of Arc and Moses, the court did not favor Schrank. Found too insane to be brought to trial, he was sent to Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, now Dodge Correctional Institution. He remained there until his death in 1943, never receiving a single letter or visitor in that time. He He was considered a model patient, very quiet, and was affectionately called Uncle John by the workers and other patients. After his death, his body was donated to the medical school at Marquette University, now the Medical College of Wisconsin, for anatomical dissection. After being examined in the Milwaukee hospital, Roosevelt was put on a train for Chicago. When he arrived, doctors concluded that, quote, had the bullet not struck in its course practically everything which he carried on his person, he would have died. The wound was not fatal, and Roosevelt lived the rest of his life with the bullet in his chest. A smart move, considering the aforementioned assassinated President James Garfield did not die from the bullet wound, but rather from the infection that came from the doctors continuing to try and operate on him. The doctors and nurses treating him in Milwaukee proclaimed that he was, quote, the most unusual patient who ever was administered in the Johnson Emergency Hospital, in that he was absolutely calm and unperturbed, and influenced everyone about him to be so, although excitement and unrest were in the very atmosphere, and he was suffering much. This further popularized the idea that he was tough as a bull moose. Once in Chicago, he found letters from world leaders such as the Kaiser Wilhelm and King George V congratulating him and wishing him well. Once he was released from the hospital, while walking in front of a car to the train station, a car backfiring startled the group. Roosevelt jokingly announced, "Ah, I've been shot again." According to the book written on the assassination attempt by 3 witnesses, one of the nurses aiding Roosevelt after the attempt said that she was sorry it had happened in Milwaukee, her city. Roosevelt consoled her by saying it could have happened anywhere, and a nearby security guard said he was glad it wasn't done by a Milwaukeean, but by a New Yorker, so it didn't tarnish the name of the city. Not only did it not tarnish the name of Milwaukee, on the contrary, the event has been almost forgotten. All memorabilia from the assassination attempt is kept at the Teddy Roosevelt Birthplace National Historic Site and Museum in New York City. Besides a reenactment in 2012 to commemorate the 100-year anniversary and a small plaque in the Hyatt Regency Hotel where the shooting happened, very little recognition is given to the Cream City for housing this, at the time, monumental historical event.